Hey everybody, good Sunday evening. We are back again. It's in between the holidays, so hopefully you guys are taking some time away from family and friends and the game table to come join us for the final episode of the top 50 classic adventure modules of all time. My name is Chris. I will be your co-host, and to my virtual right or left, as always, is Rick. Rick, say hi to everybody.
Hey, folks. Happy holidays, everyone.
Yes,
We're
happy
sliding
holidays.
in right in between, Christmas
Yes.
and Hanukkah and before New Year. So we're hitting all the holidays. So I hope
The
everyone's having a
holidays
good one.
couldn't stop us from bringing yet one more show.
No,
Our final show
no.
for the year and possibly our final show forever too. But anyway, happy holidays to everybody. This is we've already presented the top 50 classic adventure modules of all time. Those haven't all been posted to YouTube yet, so you might not exactly want to watch this one if you don't want to spoil the surprise. But hopefully this won't be too much of a surprise. So we've already done the top 50. This is the show. This is the after show. This is the where we're going to talk about some of the interesting things in the data. I don't have
Mhm.
charts and graphs this time. I apologize. It's been kind of busy with the holidays and my move and everything. Oh, and shout out to Bobby Uh-oh, who is watching. Yes, the dude has done moving, and hopefully my mic is back to 100%. So, always glad to chat with you. And I'm going to throw that out there before we get into it. Is if folks have any specific questions about the list, any of the top 50, I have the list up on my computer so I can reference it on my other screen. If you have any questions on did this adventure make it, obviously only 50 made it. We're going to talk about, we're not going to talk about every single one that didn't make the top 50 because there was a lot. But if you have a burning question of like, oh, hey, did this adventure make it? I can quickly go through my list in real time and let folks know if it made the list and what number it was at and everything. So before we jump into it, Rick had a great idea. I should probably remind everybody how we did the voting. So we had a panel, we had 31 panelists, and they were all Goodman Games contributors and friends of the Goodman Games family and whatnot. Most of these folks have been gaming for 30, 40, 50 years, so they kind of remember all these classics. We had them pick their top 25 adventures, figuring that top 25 would be plenty to be able to generate some stats and actually put top 50 together. And then we assigned those points in reverse order. So if you voted for, Tomb of Horrors number 1, that scored 25 points. And then, if you scored Keep on the Borderlands number 2, that was 24 points, etc., all the way down to 1 point. And then we added on, just for fun, and I actually went back and looked at these. We added on the number of votes on top of that total number. So once you got that number, then if a particular adventure got 20 votes, for example, then we would add 20 onto it to adjust the value, kind of give a little bit of perk for something that might have gotten a bunch of extra votes versus others. I did actually go back and look through the entire list, and I don't believe that actually caused any kind of changing of the
Yeah.
rankings. So that was interesting. Um, and some people did not provide a whole list of 25. Some people couldn't come up with 25. They could only come up with 10 or 13 or 17 or something. So if they did that, then we prorated the numbers. We threw them into a calculator and we kind of, this number would be approximately that number, and we used those numbers. So that's how we calculated everything. Um, so with that, real quick announcement before we get started. Terror from the Underdeep, our next crowdfunding campaign will be launching in like 2 weeks, January
Wow.
14th. So 2 weeks from Tuesday, I think it is. So make sure you follow that. And Elena, if you have the link handy to the landing page for that, if you could drop that in the chat, that'd be amazing. But if you don't, I'm just springing it on you now. So don't worry about it. And yes, Bobby Uh-oh is still in there. And yes, this is probably the final show ever. And yeah, there's the link in there if you guys
There
want to
we
follow
go.
along on the project. So Rick, before we get started with what we're going to talk about,
Mhm.
any other comments or anything about the after show, about the stats, the list, anything?
Um, no, I mean, going to go into it. I mean, we're going to cover our surprises. We're going to cover some interesting little tidbits we found, some things about authors, some things about game systems that made it. I especially find it interesting the non D&D
Yeah,
entries that kind of found their way, and there were some surprises there.
there were.
And I think for both of us, there were some surprises in the list in general. There were definitely items that made both the top 10 and then the lower, I guess, lower portion of the 50 that was completely unexpected for me. So I'm just eager to talk about that. I think
All
that'll be
right.
fun to get into some of that.
Great. All
I
right.
love
So
this analysis,
yeah, I
so
know. I love
for
it
me, the
too.
after show is like as good as the last show because I think
I
this is
agree.
where we kind of dig down into the gears and really get into it.
All
So,
right. All right. So the first thing, and like a reminder, folks in the chat, if there's any specific questions on our lists that you want answered, throw them in the chat and we'll get to them as we get to a good natural pause. The first thing we're going to talk about, most folks I think realize that I'm a pretty big sports fan. So in the NCAA tournament selection process, you always hear the last four in and the last four out. So we're going to do a real quick discussion on the last five out, the five adventures that basically did not make the list that were basically number 51, 52, 53, 54, and 55. So because I think this is interesting, these are ones that were really close, but
mhm.
just did not make the cut. And I guess the first one that came really, really close at number 51 was X4 Master of the Desert Nomads, which was an expert adventure. And that one actually did get 3 votes, but it just fell short. Ironically, that is the only adventure that got 3 total votes that did not make the top 50. So 3 was kind of
Hmm.
like if you were on 3 lists, unless you were this adventure, you would crack the top 50. So I thought that was kind of cool because that means at
Yeah.
least 3 of our 30 panelists had to put an adventure on there for it to make the list. And none, there was one that got 1 vote that almost made the top 50. And I felt
Hmm.
that would have been like that, I don't know, because one person putting that first on their list, that would have been kind of weird making a top 50. So anyway, yeah, so that was number 51. Do you remember that adventure, Rick?
I believe I do. Now, was that David Cook or who wrote that?
I
I'm
think
trying
that
to
was
remember.
David Cook. Yes, I believe it
All
was
right.
David Cook. And it
Yes,
was
I
part
do
one of a
remember
two-part
that.
series.
Yeah. I want to say I'm surprised it's that high, but it is 51. So, we'll give it a little rope. Um, I
Nice.
never played through it, but I remember the adventure. Because usually, honestly, anything he wrote was good, though.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, totally. It was actually
yeah.
good. I actually contemplated putting it on my list, actually. I
Oh,
remember when I
wow.
was doing
Okay.
my review and I came
Uh-huh.
across those two. I was like, those were pretty good, but it was just so hard. There was a couple of non TSR adventures that I actually wanted to get on the list, but I would phrase it this way. I think if I stuck to all TSR adventures, I think it
Hmm.
probably might have snuck in on my list. It probably would have been 24 or 25 or
Hmm.
something like that. Bobby, uh-oh, is in for the long haul, hoping for a Commanders loss tonight. I am right with you. My wife is a Falcons fan, so she's totally hoping for a Commanders loss tonight. And he's been benching all of our videos and says we're pretty cool dudes. So
All
we'll take
right.
that. So
Yeah. I
uh,
saw you were
yes,
riding while you were watching while you were driving too, Bobby. So just, if you haven't gotten to the part where the two Maharas made the top five, then just don't drive off the road when you hear that. 'Cause
exactly.
there might be a few surprises, but glad you're watching. Glad we can put you onto some of these old books.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think Wizard should give us a kickback because we've got people definitely going out and buying some of these
Um,
old modules. That's a good thing, though.
guilty as charged. So when I was at PAX, I dropped 100 large on the Call of Cthulhu Masks of what is it?
Oh,
The beautiful the seventh
a nice
edition
one, huh?
that came out. Oh, it's gorgeous. I mean, it's gorgeous. I got a sweet deal on it. It's normally like $130, and didn't have to pay shipping for
Nice.
something that was like 15 pounds. So it was
We're
awesome.
luring you to the dark side of horror
Oh
gaming. And
yeah.
I went out and got some of the components, component adventures of the Enemy Within because of this
Oh
show,
nice. Yeah, that was on
which
my
I
list
was
too.
not as familiar with. So yeah, we're as guilty as any. We do it too,
Yeah.
folks. And it's really Chris can tell you when we talk about these and kind of re-review them, we often go back and really review them in detail. And sometimes it's the first time in years and years I've looked at these modules and really read them in detail. All of a sudden you find a newfound love of these things and you want to just run
Yep.
them. You want to grab them and throw them on the table and
Yes.
just get your
Totally.
players, down. That too many adventures, not enough time. This is what happens
Yes.
when you get old. It's tough.
So let me get really quickly through these other ones that just missed our
Hmm.
list. Number 52 was GW2 Famine in Fargo, which was a Gamma World first edition adventure. So that was cool. Gamma
Mm.
World just missed our list. Gamma World did pop up a couple of times. That did get a couple of votes for a couple of different adventures. Actually, three adventures, I believe, got votes. But so that was interesting. I've never
Yeah.
played Gamma World, not familiar with Gamma World. But again, something where I'm like, I should really go get one of those old books and
I was a
take a
big
look at it.
fan of the first edition
Yeah,
of Gamma World.
I
So
figured you were.
seeing this, or I'm assuming the Legion of Gold maybe was got a vote or two.
I think so. I could hold on. I could
I
probably
that
tell
would
you
make
that.
me, feel warm and fuzzy inside to know
I
that.
think
I didn't
Legion of
give it a
Gold
few
did.
votes because I only had 25, but if
Yeah,
Legion of Gold was in there,
actually Legion of Gold came in what number was that? Oh, my numbers went away. Not in the top 50, obviously. Looks like it was
yeah.
down a bit down. I didn't number all of them, so yeah, not
All
close.
right.
Probably the 70s or the 80s. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so that definitely made
Well,
it
glad it got a
interesting.
little love.
Yeah. Number 53 was L1, The Secret of Bone Hill. And that was interesting that that one did not make the list. I was
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
surprised. I like
I
the
was too.
adventure sort of, but it does certainly have its warts and everything. But
Yeah.
so I get it, but I don't get it. Like I think I would
Yeah.
have liked to see it sneak onto the list, maybe over something that was more recent.
Mhm.
But I understand that it didn't. So, and I think
I
ultimately it
agree.
did
I
make
think
my
it's a
list.
very polarizing, both L1 and L2. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with them.
Yeah,
And even when we covered Bone Hill in Talking TSR, that video got really a lot of views. I remember that was a very popular video. So
yeah.
there's definitely some Len Lakoffa fans out there. So,
L2 did not make our list. I thought it did. Wow,
oh,
look
I
at
didn't, yeah, I
I
don't
don't
think
think so.
L2 made the list.
I don't think so. Yeah, I'm looking
Yeah,
now.
I think just Secret of Bone
Wow,
Hill,
I'm
which is again
shocked
kind of
actually.
it. Well, just yeah, for historical significance, being a sort of mystery murder, adventure thing. I'm
Whoa. I'm
kind of
so wait, I'm
surprised
like looking
L2
over our
didn't
list.
hit.
Get out. That L2 did not
Yeah,
make
I
the
don't think.
list.
All right, count that as another surprise because I don't think
Yeah,
that made it.
I'm looking right now. I don't see it. I am very surprised that
Yeah, yeah.
L2 did not make the list. I would have thought L2 would have gotten over L1. Wow. That is shocking. Huh. Wow, yeah, I am deep down into the list. There it is. It
Oh,
didn't
did it
make
make
our
it?
list, but it got two votes.
Okay, all
So,
right.
and not a lot of points. It was way down near the bottom. Wow. Surprising. Okay. So it did get one less vote than I'm guessing that L1 got a pretty high vote is probably what put it up in the contenders. So
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. Number 54 was Ruins of Adventure, which was
Hmm.
a collection of four AD&D adventures set in the Forgotten Realms based on the first gold box video game, Pools of
Yeah.
Radiance or Pool of Radiance. I don't own this one, or if I do own it, it's deep in storage somewhere. I'm guessing I own it and it's deep in storage, but it's not in my first edition books that I have out that I regularly reference.
Hmm.
So I'm like actually contemplating buying this one because I'm like
Mm.
I played Pool of Radiance a fair amount, and I'm like, why do I
Yeah.
not have this one? So
Yeah, I remember at the time there was a very big crossover effort by TSR to sort
yeah,
of,
yep. When
because
they were
because
rolling out
Pool
the
of
new
Radiance
variants, yep,
definitely took
yep,
off, was definitely like back in the day, Pool of Radiance was sort of like what Baldur's Gate 3
yep,
is now,
It was,
it was
it
very
was actually very
popular.
good. Yeah,
Yeah. So, TSR wanted to capitalize on that. And I remember them suddenly marketing a whole bunch of adventures with sort of tie-ins to that, and nominally the Forgotten Realms as well. So interesting, very interesting.
So,
It's
all right.
not something I would have thought to be on the list. So I'm surprised to see that on there.
Jeff Whitty Art is here. Hey, hello, hello. And yeah, Bone Hill, Bobby Uh-oh's Bone Hill is awesome mixed with Salt Marsh. So good together. I could see that. I could
I
totally
can
see
see
that.
that.
Wow, that
Totally.
is a crossover that I want so much to do now. I want to look at some maps and then figure that out. Anyway, okay. And number 55, the last one of the five that did make it in, was DL2, Dragons of Flame. And that's Dragonlance, obviously, AD&D.
Mhm.
Little bit surprised that DL2 is makes this list. I think DL1 actually made our top list, if I recall, and I think it was kind of DL1 made the list, and I think people were also kind of pigeonholing like the whole Dragonlance series. I know we got a vote or two. Yeah, Dragons of Despair
Yeah.
DL1 was number 26.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is why number two made it was because, well, A, people usually start at the beginning. Most people play the first
Hmm.
one, second one, and then they don't play all 15 of them or 16, whatever it was. But the second
Yeah.
one, Dragons of Flame, did feature the Red Dragon. So that
Hmm.
could very well be why that one was a little bit more popular. That was like the second half of the first novel. So I get it. I totally get it. But that one
Hmm.
just missed our list.
Yeah.
So,
I remember Dragons of Despair did not surprise me that it was on that list because that always was the standout.
oh
But
yeah, yeah. I remember that.
for the reasons you mentioned, I can totally see
Yeah.
Dragons of
That and
Flame
that
in your
was a
stuff.
solid adventure. That was a solid
Oh
adventure.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
great artwork,
Yeah.
cool
Great
maps.
maps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Lost City and everything. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
good stuff in there. Good stuff in there. All right, we're gonna move on to talk a little bit about things that did not make the top 50 list. So first of all, so I told you when we opened up the show, we had 31 panelists and we asked for of the 31 folks, we asked for them to give us a top 25 list. Not all gave us 25 different adventures, but we did get a lot. But we had a total of 209 adventures receive at least one vote. And I'm like flabbergasted by that. Absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, I figured, when we were putting this list together, I was like, well, if we asked for 25, we should easily get 50. I thought we would
Hmm.
get maybe 75 or 100 different
Oh yeah.
adventures
Yeah.
named. 209. And of those
Yeah.
209, obviously a lot of them, 138 of them got one vote each. So as you can tell, obviously a lot of that, toss those. And that's why, like I said, it was kind of important that, that three vote was the threshold. Like you had to get three votes to make our list. So
Yeah.
obviously the 138, got eliminated right off the bat. So I find that kind of fascinating.
Yeah, we
Um,
had quite the range of game systems in there too
we
that
did. I
were
believe it was
represented. I
28.
was hoping,
Yeah.
it was one of those things where we announced at the beginning of this show that hey, this is not just D&D only. And I had a sneaking suspicion we'd see Call of Cthulhu and maybe one or two others, but I was happily surprised as just how kind of, I don't know, open-minded for lack of a better word, that
Yeah.
our voters were in this, because there's a whole series, right, of different
Yes.
systems that
So,
were and got multiple votes, some of them.
oh yeah, yeah.
We
So
already
we had
mentioned Gamma
28.
World, but there's others.
Yep. Not counting all the different versions of D&D, first edition, second edition, old edition, D&D, third edition. I believe there was some fifth edition votes in there too. I don't think there was any shocking. There's another one of those shocking and amazement surprises. There were no fourth edition adventures that were nominated, but there were
Ouch.
28 different game systems received at least one vote, and a few received several. The James Bond RPG received two
Mhm.
votes. Top Secret received two votes. And when I say two votes, two adventures were nominated. Pendragon, first edition Pendragon was nominated. That's another thing that uh, I believe. Cthulhu. Is it? It's Chaosium. I think Chaosium.
Chaosium, yeah,
They're the ones that
they
publish it.
make
Yeah,
Pendragon. Yeah.
and they make Pendragon. I think they have a beautiful version of Pendragon that they just re-released, if I'm not mistaken, like a glorious slipcover one that's probably going to be on a bookshelf at some point. Uh, Twilight 2000. I've never played. Three of those adventures got nominated.
All
Um,
right.
Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green received 4 votes, and we saw the Call of Cthulhu, and those and obviously those were strong contenders because those three of those Call of Cthulhu's made our list.
Oh
Um,
yeah, they were up there. So
Yep, yep. The old, near and dear to my heart, the old West End games, Star Wars, where I cut my teeth, my very first publication,
mhm.
made 2 of them, and no, if you're asking, I did not vote for my own things. Mine did not make it on that. There were some heavy hitters that wrote some of those earlier ones.
Mhm.
Gamma World, we already talked about 3 Gamma Worlds made
Yeah,
it. And then probably 2 of the more obscure. Well, actually, I'll say 3 of the more obscure ones. Looking at my list, yeah, 3 of the more obscure ones is we had one L5R role-playing game, not the card game. Legends of the Five
okay.
Rings adventure was nominated. One Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtle adventure was was nominated. That was a role-playing game, and one Conan, the Die 20 Conan role-playing game, which was by
Interesting.
Mongoose. Yeah.
Interesting.
So those are really cool. And 2 votes for this kind of blew my mind. I probably should have put this on my surprise list. The Fighting Fantasy books
Fighting
received two
fantasy, right?
votes. Now, if you guys don't remember, those are kind of like choose your own adventure books, but they did have like a page or two of rules. They were not an original game system. Now, ironically, they were a game. A game system I think was kickstarted, I think, or crowdfunded a couple of years ago, where there is a fantasy fighting role playing system now. But back in the 70s and the 80s, there wasn't. So that was cool that 2 novels actually got votes on our list. So as
Yeah,
you can see,
yeah,
and folks, people pick things from Dungeon Magazine, Dragon Magazine,
yeah,
Polyhedron. There were individual
yeah.
modules from some of the collections. There was Adventure Pack number 1, was an old TSR adventure, and some people picked
Mhm.
out some of there. So we had the whole run of like
Oh
things and
yeah.
everything.
I mean, what we had champions and Marvel
Yep,
superheroes were both in there, so
yep,
the superhero contingent is covered.
yep,
You know, Chill made it, which
yep.
is nice, and I saw Paranoia made it, and I
Yes.
actually had a Paranoia adventure on mine. So
Oh, okay.
just yeah,
There you
just to
go.
show you, I occasionally take a walk on the wild side.
Yep,
So
yep. Jeff Whitty art.
um,
Yes, I hope Marvel superheroes made the list. They didn't make the top 50, but we did have
didn't make
votes.
the 50, but
Yep,
yeah.
we did have votes
So
for them. And also, Jeff, thank you for being dedicated. Vacationing in Thailand right now and is tuning in live to watch our show. So, I mean, if
oh,
that's not
see,
dedication, I mean, that
that
is
is
dedication.
dedication.
So
But
we give
but you
Jeff
know what
Whitty
goes
art
better with coffee and a bagel than
than
this, right?
than us talking about old
Yeah,
adventures.
I
So
mean it
yeah,
just is. So I made a quick list of the non D&D items that made the list, which I'm going to run through super
go for it.
fast. We had, well, Dark. I shouldn't say Dark Tower is D&D, but I just threw it in there. But let's go to the non D&D. All right, we have the former mentioned Masks of Narlathotep, Call of Cthulhu, made number
Yep.
20. Horror from the Orient Express, Call of Cthulhu again, made number 23. So we had Call of Cthulhu made 20 and 23 out of the
I
top.
know.
That's pretty good.
Very well represented.
Um, the Enemy Within, which is Warhammer role playing game, fantasy role playing game, made 28. Shadows over Bugenhafen, which is part of the Enemy Within, made 31. So a close contender. I think we had a sort of, that was like a sort of G1 to 3 situation there.
Yes. Yep.
The DCC RPG, our own little Goodman Games baby, made 34 with Sailors of the Starless Sea, which is just an outstanding adventure. So I'm
Yes.
thrilled
And
that
if you want the 5e version of that coming soon.
it's coming.
Yep, it's
It's
coming.
coming, yeah. But that is a super solid adventure by our own Harley Stroh. The Haunting, again, Call of Cthulhu, made number
Yep.
40. The Famine in Fargo, which we've just mentioned, Gamma World, was a near miss at 52. yeah, so we had some good ones in there, and then
Yeah,
we had what we had Pendragon and Mongoose came Conan Mongoose system came really close.
yeah,
The Pathfinder Age of Worms campaign, which is really wonderful, came in at 63. So
yes.
yeah, some other entries in there. So because I was trying to think, aside from the Age of Worms, do we have any third edition kind of stuff in there? I
So it's
kind of
interesting you
consider
mentioned
mentally, I
that.
consider
Wow,
Pathfinder sort of third
it's
edition.
almost like there's a plant in the audience. There were some third edition stuff came in there, but what was really interesting is I mentioned earlier that you needed to get 3 votes to hit the top 50. There was
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
3 adventures that got 3 votes that did not hit the top 50, and two of
Mm,
them are very interesting. The one was we already talked about X4 Master of the Desert Nomads, but the other two that didn't were the Sunless Garden, which was a third
mhm.
edition a DCC adventure. It's not DCC RPG, it was third edition D&D.
Yeah. Dungeon
But
Crawl
in Goodman
Classics.
Games DCC line. And then also the third edition, the Sunless Citadel. So very interesting. If you put the word sunless in your title, you probably didn't make our list because two of them had
All right,
sunless
mental
in them.
note.
So yeah,
The
and that was
Sunless
two
Citadel
third
was a
edition
really good
adventures that
adventure.
were very
Yeah.
close that did not make the cut.
Nice.
And again,
Yeah.
Sunless Citadel is a classic. I do
It's a
really like
really good
Sunless
adventure.
Citadel.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't have the heart to put a third edition adventure on this list, in my opinion. It just wasn't too classic. Maybe in another 10 years, maybe.
Yeah.
So
It couldn't make the top 25 for mine, but I remember that. And it had either a prequel or a sequel called Forge. What was the name of
the
that?
Forge of Fury, and that was solid
Forge
as
of
well.
Fury.
That was
Yeah.
solid as
Though
well.
that pairing of adventures for third edition were to me standouts of third edition adventures for sure.
Yeah. So Jeff has a question. If Fighting Fantasy made the list, and we did talk about it briefly, it did actually. Two of them received votes, did not make the top 50. The one is Hell House, which I'm not familiar with. But the other one, which I'm very familiar with, is the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, which is, I believe, Fighting Fantasy #1.
Mm,
And in the one that most people cut their teeth on. So yes, there were two Fighting Fantasy books actually
nice.
received some votes. So yes.
And
Um,
then Age of Worms, to answer the comment, that came in at number 63. So
yes. Yep. That
couldn't make the
was
top 50, but it was up there. So
yeah. I actually adored the Shackled City path. I believe it
mhm.
was Age of Worms the second one. No, it was Age of Worms the second one or the third one? There was
Yeah, technically Age of Worms
that
was
was
the
the one with
sec
the
because I
Isle of
think
Dread and everything. Was that Isle of Worms? Okay.
because the with Kios and all that because
Yes.
uh,
Yes. Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Okay.
because the first technically I guess you could call it was really the first Pathfinder, but it was their
Yes.
second campaign path.
Yes.
Because I believe the Shackled City
That was
was
in
like a
Dungeon Magazine.
polyhedron thing, wasn't it, or
It was
something?
Dungeon
Wasn't it?
Magazine. Yeah, it was
Oh,
in
Dungeon. All
Dungeon.
right.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so I think technically Age of Worms was their second one, but there were components of Age of Worms that I
That's right.
thought were
It was Savage
mind-blowingly
Tides.
good.
Savage Tides was the second one. That was the Isle of Dread one. Age of Worms was the third one, I believe. And you're right. That was the Age of Worms was the first one, I believe, that Pathfinder did that
Yeah, it
they
was the
bought
first
control of.
Pathfinder with Kios. Savage Tides
Yep.
was the Demogorgon related one.
Yes. Yep.
Another good one. I mean,
Oh yeah, no, they were
I love the
solid.
Isle
They
of
were solid.
Dread.
Yeah.
And they even had a C1 sort of tie-in in that,
Yeah.
which I did not go unnoticed by me.
Yeah. No, they
Because
that,
I love
that
that
those there's
C1.
some good stuff in those. And because I
Yeah, no,
remember
there were some because you had some there were some very good authors at the
very
time.
good.
A
Yeah.
lot of their component modules were written or adventures were written by like Richard Pett, whose
Yep.
work I like a lot.
Yeah.
I work with Richard Pett on one of our projects once, and
Yeah.
super nice guy, and he's got that dark way of
Yeah.
almost like D&D/horror is the style of writing he does, which I enjoy sometimes. So yeah, some interesting stuff there. Uh,
Nice.
so yeah, a lot of things represented here, which is so
Yes.
cool.
Totally, without a doubt. So yeah, this is all good conversation. And like I said, folks, you guys are putting questions in the chat. That's great. If you have any specific questions on where anything showed up on the list, let us know. I've got the list pulled up and I can access it really quickly in that. So the next thing I think we're going to talk about is some of the popular series that we talked about. So remember, we
Yep.
came into this project. we said basically if it's a book, you can vote for it. So you can vote for GDQ 1 through 7. That could be that could get a vote. You could also vote for G1 and you could vote for G2 and you could vote for G3. And I get it that sometimes those would cannibalize each other. If we made it where you couldn't vote for all those, then yeah, GDQ1 would probably kick butt just because it would get probably a lot of votes because everybody's like, oh, I like that one adventure from there. So we're just going to go over a couple of the really popular series and ones that had some interesting stats and hits on it and everything. So I think the first one that we really need to get into because it's pretty clear, like which is like the best series of all time, the S series. In the S
Yep.
series, we had uh, S3. Barrier Peaks came in number 3. Tomb of Horrors came in number 4. Lost Caverns of
The
Jojan,
Soch
whatever.
camp, I always say. Yeah.
Yes, was number 6. Wait, oh no, S2. I'm sorry. S2 was that's White Plume Mountain. Getting my things
Yes.
confused. S2 is
Yeah.
White Plume Mountain. And Lost Caverns is of that one.
S4.
Number
Yeah.
19.
Yeah.
So three in the top 10. Three in the top 10,
Yeah.
three in the top 6. That's strong.
Yeah.
That is strong.
S for special.
Yeah,
For
yeah, and obviously
sure.
most of them written by Gygax, right? Yeah, he wrote 3 of them, and
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, and was it who wrote S2? Was that wasn't Alan Hammock? Was it? Oh, it's right over there. So it's fine. Yeah, or is it Tom Moldvay?
What is that? White Plume?
White Plume Mountain. You might have that on
Lawrence
the way.
Schick wrote White Plume. Lawrence Schick, right?
Oh, that's right. Yes, Lauren Schick. Okay, got it. Okay. So anyway, that's a great showing for that series. Um, so the GDQ series. So this is interesting. We were really curious to see how this was all gonna
Oh yeah.
fall out.
Yep.
Um, everyone, every single adventure, including G1 through 3 and GDQ 1 through 7, every single adventure made our top 50 except for G1. G1,
Yep.
Steeding of the Hill Giants, only received 1 vote.
Yep.
And D1 also did, I don't think D1 got a single vote. So,
I don't think which surprised me. I know it's not considered the greatest of the series for
yeah.
sure, but I was surprised the poor thing didn't get one vote.
I'm
So
not actually. I think
no,
that worked out exactly the way it should have, in my opinion. Although
uh,
I have much more respect for the Hill Giants now than I did. And let's see. So we
agreed.
had,
Agreed.
so again, this is kind of surprising. So the top one of this list was Q1 at number 14.
Yeah, I'm
Which
still proud.
boggles my mind.
No, I
But
know.
again,
I was gonna save that for later, but
yeah,
Q1 being at 14 and G3 being at 37 and G2 being at 47, I'm still processing that.
yeah. Well, again, I think they probably cannibalized themselves a little bit because you had G1 through 3 and then you had
Yeah, yeah,
GDQ 1 through 7. So I mean, again, you could
yeah.
make the argument that if you remove the series, votes might not have been as high for Q1. And we talked about Q1 on our show, how kind of surprised that we were
Right.
that was as high as us. But
Yeah.
but yeah, but this well represented. So like you said, G2 was number 47, just squeaked into the list. G3 was 37. D2 was 46. That was probably on the coattails of you and I right up there alone. We probably pulled that one into the top 50 just because of the two of us. D1 through D1 and 2 was number 36. So there you go. So D1 did get some love,
All right.
probably,
So yeah.
because that was number 36. D3, 33.
Mhm.
Q1 number 14. We already discussed that. G1 through 3 was number 15. That's probably right, and
Yeah. Yep.
GDQ 1 through 7 on our list was number 22, where on the Dungeon magazine list 30 years ago, 20 years ago on the top 30 list was number 1. So again,
Yeah.
we diluted it because we let you vote for any of them so we could let some of those, shine and
Yeah.
everything. So, if we would have done things differently, I'm sure the numbers would have come out differently. So, it's like
Yeah.
stats.
No,
Stats say
I
whatever.
think we knew going in that that one because it had been republished and separated and
Yeah.
repurposed so many times. And I think literally thinking of it now, right now in the spot, I can't help but wonder if the individual adventures took a hit simply because when
Yeah,
people started playing, it was being released as D1 to 2
yeah.
or D1 to 3.
I I would
And,
say yes.
only the real old timers maybe saw it in its original kind of separate incarnation. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people probably stumbled into it when it was being
Yeah.
bunched in some way.
I
So,
would agree with that. And also when you pull out the individual pieces, sometimes
mhm.
they don't stand up as well. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
and it's like
Yeah.
it's more of like you said, the sum of the parts is more.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
clearly I think there's some of that going on because when you do pull out
Yeah.
some of those individual entries, you see some of the warts on them, I think, a little bit
Yeah.
more as opposed to when they're in the collection and you've got that warm fuzzy feeling about them.
Yeah.
So the next series we'll talk about is the A series, the Slaver series.
Mhm.
So three of these made the list. There's A1, A2, A3, A4. Actually, there is A0 also. Did get any votes though. And then there's the compilation Scourge of the Slave Lords, already mentioned in the chat, A1 through 4. So the overall
Mhm.
Scourge of the Slave Lords, A1 through 4, was number 16.
Mhm.
A4 was number 24. You and I probably helped that along a little
Oh,
bit.
for
And
sure.
A1 was number 45.
Okay.
Um, A2 got one vote, I believe, and A3 got no votes. And I think
Okay.
that is
That's
probably
fine.
the ranking that it should be. I think that
Yeah.
probably worked out well.
That's pretty
Yep.
much. Yeah, out of that series, as you know, I was always, A3 always had the least love for me. But I always had a soft spot for the beginning and end of that particular series for sure. And the compilation, again, it might have been the version people got, but it
Yeah,
was a good compilation. It
it
had
was. It
wonderful,
was.
it had good extra material, it had good lead-in material, set in the wild coast of, Greyhawk. So they really, it wasn't just throw the books under one cover. They actually put some extra,
Yeah.
they
Really
almost gave you like what we would call the ore treatment, the way we try to
kind of.
do with
Yeah.
all these
And
things.
and led
They
to
sort of did, at least
disappointment.
with that one.
Yeah, led to disappointment with the other compilations. And
For
actually, some
sure.
of the other
For sure.
compilations, they outright cut parts out. Like I think
Oh yeah.
B1 through
Yeah.
9, they cut like entire halves of modules out and they said, well, we're just gonna
Yeah.
give you this part and
Yeah.
everything. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, it's like they really, so maybe we shouldn't have done, 9 adventures in there. So yes. Yeah. So, yep. Bobby, I made my own list, being more of a 90s player, and I had a Chris Perkins Dungeon Magazine adventure on it. No, we had votes for Chris Perkins Dungeon Magazine adventures in our thing. Chris Perkins was before he became the editor, he was very
Mhm.
prolific.
Oh yeah.
And it's a great adventures. So, without a doubt, we could have easily,
Yeah.
if we
And
would
there
have
was
done
some very good adventures in
yeah,
Dungeon Magazine,
yep,
and not the ones we wrote.
yeah,
But other
the
ones,
ones that he wrote.
I was always a fan of the Mud Sorcerer's Tomb. I'll give a throw out vote to that. I
Yeah.
didn't put it up on the list, but I always thought it was a wonderful adventure. And
But
like you said,
I
Chris
think
Perkins
that
put
one
on a
got a
lot of
vote
stuff.
though. I think it
Did
did.
it?
I think I'm not sure. I don't
It
remember,
was
but
a, it was a good adventure.
it was a good
Um,
adventure. It really was. So
yeah,
yeah, I thought I thought the I'm
I
just looking
remember
there. Maybe it
that
did
one
not.
well.
But yeah, there was a few things. Yeah, no, it looks like it did not. So anyway, before we get to go down a rabbit hole here too much. So our next series, the I series. This one's a little trickier. So
Yep.
there's a lot, there's 13 I modules. We're not going to go through all of them, but so here's the interesting one. So I1 was number 11, Dwellers of the Forbidden City.
Mhm.
We agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yep.
I2 actually received two votes. That's the Lizard Tomb, the Lizard King's tomb or something. Tomb of the Lizard
Interesting.
King.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was interesting. So then we have I3, I4, and I5. So if you take them all together as I3 through 5, the Desert of Desolation came in number 13. A little
Mhm.
low, in my opinion. I would have liked to see that crack the top 10, actually. Um, but and here's where you're probably seeing the individual pieces kind of cannibalize each other because I3 was number 30.
Mhm.
I4 was number 60 and I5 was number 57. So yeah, so you can see that, you break the parts up and then, but you add them all
Yeah.
together and you get a much better, because that's the way
And
most
yet the
people
whole
saw
compilation
it.
came in at number
Yeah.
13, right? So you can see the
Yes.
love was there for the whole thing.
Yes. Totally. And then I6. Infamous. On number two on our list, number one, I believe on the, was it number one? No, GDQ was number one. Number three, I think, on
Yeah,
the Dungeon Magazine list. And that didn't even count. We did actually get one vote for the 5e version of Curse of Strahd, got one vote. So that
interesting.
was number two. And then bless my heart feels warm all inside because I-12 actually made our list at 41. Yes, it was probably because I put it up there really high. But it did get other votes. So it wasn't just me, people. It wasn't just me. Very excited about that. None of the other, I think a couple of the other eyes got like one vote here or there, but none of the other eyes. But that's pretty strong work for the eyes, without a
Mhm.
doubt. Um, and then we're going to move on to the B series. The B series, surprising in my opinion on how high these ended up. Obviously, B2 was number one. That was Keep on the Borderlands. So you're not really, there's not a contender after that. And B4 came in at number 10. So pretty
Mhm.
impressive there. B1 came in at number 21.
I was
B3,
happy to
Palace of the
see.
Silver Princess came in number 27. So,
Interesting.
yeah, and actually, B6, The Veiled Society, came in at number 35. I think that was probably a little
Okay.
bit of the
All right.
surprise one in there. I do like me
Yeah.
some B6. I think B6 was actually on my list, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, and B5 did not make the list. Horror on the Hill or whatever it was
Okay.
called. So,
Yeah. I'm
but
kind of
yeah, yeah,
surprised to see Silver Princess and that B6 made it. I'm not
yeah,
surprised by B1 and B2 because for a lot of people that was their first exposure, I think,
exactly.
to
Yeah, no, that,
adventure
yeah,
module.
without a doubt.
I think that definitely artificially inflated B2 a little higher than,
Yeah, and I think
simple adventuring would have done maybe, but
yeah. I think the infamy of B3 and its story probably also
totally,
inflated it a little bit. But
totally.
it is actually a pretty cool adventure. I kind of like it. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
got
so
interesting bones. I think,
it
it's one of
does.
those that if you put the work into it and kind of, sand off the rough spots, I think you could make something of it.
Yeah, certainly. And the last series we're just going to talk about briefly here is the X series. X1 was number five on our list. Again, a little bit surprised. I think that's a little too high, but I understand why it is. It got the OAR treatment, so I understand that.
Yeah.
X2 was number nine. Not one of my favorites, but we did the OAR treatment as well, so I get that.
That
But
was
X2,
Amber, right?
yeah, that's yeah, Castle
Castle
Amber.
Amber. Okay.
X2
Yeah.
has a dedicated following of people, and I do know for a fact that many of them are contributors to Goodman Games. So I do understand that.
Yeah.
And then X8 of all things, X8, Drums of Fire Mountain, I believe it was, received one vote. So that was kind of interesting. And obviously we talked about X4 already.
Right.
What they do. So, yes, which version of the palace? That was it was the green version, Jim. Yeah, not the orange version. I don't think there's enough people on the planet. I didn't have that many
Yeah.
people on my
I
list.
sadly did not have the orange version of my library to consult.
Yeah.
So
Oh, shout out. I
I
see
did.
Dave Rosser. I know that
Oh
guy.
yeah.
Game Master Extraordinaire. Welcome in the chat and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah. So great to see you, Dave. So all right, so that was our series. So now I want to talk a little bit about what I think is fascinating about these numbers, and then Rick is going to talk about something that he thinks is fascinating. But
Yeah.
so we went over and I talked about how we calculated these numbers, how you basically we got top 25 from all the writers, from all the panelists. And then we assign them reverse numbers. So if you voted for something number one, it got 25 points. If it was number two, it got 24, 23, 22, all the way down to one. And then we added on the number of votes that you got at the end. So this is what's really interesting. I've got the numbers for the top five. And I just want to show you the really interesting drop-offs that we saw here. So B2 came in first place. B2 had 22 votes. It got the most votes of any adventure. So 22 out of our 31 panelists put B2 on their list, somewhere on their list. Um, and it received an adjusted total of 404 points. 404. Remember that number. So I6 Ravenloft came in second place. They got 21 votes, so got one less vote. And when you adjust it for the number of votes, it came in at 399 points. So
Wow.
5 points back. So it just needed to be on somebody's list 5 spots higher, and it would have tied or come in first place.
Mm,
S3, this is what I find pretty fascinating. S3
mhm,
received 19 votes. Okay, 19 votes. I6 received 21 votes. Yet S3 came in at 318 points. That's 81
mm,
points lower than I6 came in. 81.
mm. Yeah.
That jumps out as like, wow, they're 1 and 2 were right with each other. And then there was
Mhm.
a big drop off to number
Big
three.
gap.
I mean, a
Yeah.
big drop off to number three. So then we go to S1, which came in fourth place, and that received 21 votes. So it received the same number of votes as I6 received. Okay, but only 278 points. So, and that was another 40 points lower than the number three spot. So another really big drop, um, which is fascinating. X1, which came in fifth, got 18 votes, respectable, and had 273 points. So it was only 5 points behind S1 for taking over fourth place. And then another pretty big drop here in the sixth place was S2, received only 15 votes, but had 249 points. So I thought that drop off between 1 and 2 was fascinating, that it was
Yeah.
81 points when you're only scoring 400 points total. I mean, that is
Mhm.
a huge discrepancy between the two. So
Yeah.
amazing that everybody was like, yep, these are definitely the top two. Then,
Yeah.
it gets a little muddled after that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So,
It's hard though. Even myself, I found going in and trying to rate these, once you get below like three or four,
yeah,
especially for me,
yeah,
it was very,
it's
I had
hard.
a lot that I could have totally switched around. So
Yeah,
very,
same here.
very difficult.
Once I got past my top 10 or 12, it gets, and I move things around a lot in that lower part, because I was like, wow,
Yeah.
I was like, I actually put them in a ranking program, and actually where they face them off against each other, and then it spits it
Oh,
out as a
nice.
list at the end. And I'm like, which is cool, but then I still refined
Mhm.
that list a little bit, because I was like, I looked at that list and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh no, this one's definitely not that and everything. So but no, it was fascinating to kind of see the numbers. Another interesting thing, so I mentioned that we did the adjusted values and all that. In our top 50, we actually did have 5 ties, where when you adjusted the numbers, there
Mhm.
was there was actually a tie between the adjusted number points, and one of those ties was a three-way tie actually. So the way we broke those were, the first tiebreaker, I feel like this is the NFL playoff system now. The first tiebreaker
Yeah.
was number of votes. Clearly, if you got more votes in your
Good
just
way to
total,
do it.
you
Yeah.
got the nod. However, a
Yeah.
lot of them got the same number of votes. So then, in the
Boy.
age-old classic fashion, I just rolled dice to see which one was gonna be the one slot above and everything. So yeah, I mean, it didn't affect anything in the very high numbers. I think the highest ones that it affected, let me see if I could find those real quickly. The close, let's see, I think this was the highest one. The tie, yeah, I believe here. Uh Palace of the Silver Princesses at 27, and the Warhammer, The Enemy Within, both had the same number, and Palace had 6 votes, where Enemy Within had 4 votes. So you could make the argument that with 4 votes, they were higher numbers, but more people put on lists. You could really have gone
Yeah.
either way with that tiebreaker,
Right.
but I,
It's
I made
hard.
a
It's
decision,
really, yeah.
yeah, and stuck with it that way. The other
Yeah.
tiebreak was right behind that, which was C2 Ghost Tower of Inverness at number 29 and Pharaoh at number 30. And Ghost Tower got 7 votes, Pharaoh got 4. So that was
Mhm.
pretty clear. And then what was the one? Hold on a second. I had the one that was the three-way tie was they each received 3 votes, was D2 Shrine of the Kotoa,
Mhm.
G2, Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl, and Night Below.
All
And
right.
they all
I probably
and
helped
that
out all
one
three of those.
I had to roll dice for all three of those. So yeah, that was a classic dice rolling off. So, and
Nice.
for the record, I rolled a die 20. If anybody needs to know, anybody wants. So that's cool. I thought that was fascinating just to kind of do a little bit of breakdown on that. So I hear
Yeah.
you have a little breakdown that you want to share.
Yes. Just for fun, because we always talk about, Chris and I always talk about our fictional Mount Rushmore, right, of D&D authors, we picture five or six heads of the great D&D. So I don't know how
It's
that shakes
four,
out
actually. It's
as
only
opposed
four
to
heads
this.
on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. No, I know
Yes.
I'm
Oh, we
playing
talk
giving it the
about
higher
five or six.
treatment
Gotcha.
because there's I can't limit it to four, so I've got
Yeah.
to put a few more on there. Um, Now I don't know how that's going to compare to this, but I did go through and kind of look for repeat authors. Now, unsurprisingly, Gygax, was certainly a repeat offender. Now I just looked at the top 20 adventures. I did not look at all 50, but I felt like the top 20 I felt like was a valid selection. Gygax had 7 entries in the top 20, which is still more than I thought would come out. So interestingly, right after Gygax, Tom Mulvey had 4 entries in the top 20, where he
Oh.
was, either an author or co-author. Tracy and Laura Hickman, unsurprisingly, had 2 in the top 20 because we've mentioned, Pharaoh and such. David Cook had 2, again, solid author. And then Lawrence Schick had 2.
Hmm.
Now I am kind of sneaking Lawrence Schick in there because he worked on A4, which was part of the Scourge of the Slave Lords. But since A4 didn't really make the list, I guess you could debate about that. But so we'll consider him, squeaking in there with the others. But anyway, so we have Gygax, Tom Mulvey, Tracy and Laura Hickman, Lawrence Schick, and David Cook as our sort of repeat offenders in the top 20, which I
Nice.
thought was kind of interesting. So yeah,
That's cool. Yeah, and
interesting to see
obviously
how they come
Gygax
out.
pops on the list several more times after that. He did Dungeon
Oh
Land
yeah.
X1, D2 was on there, G2 was on there. Isle of the Ape, that would probably be one that you wouldn't expect him to have gotten slipped in there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so he actually, in our top 50, he at least had 10, 12, something like that. So, and then you would expect that, of course. So,
Yeah.
that's interesting, fascinating. I would it's funny. I would probably put Janelle Jacquez on that list. She did have 2 in our top 50, but
Yeah.
just the impact of her Caverns of Thracia and Dark Tower. And I know we're not biased about this because we've obviously worked with her on those conversions, but I mean, obviously, when you convert classics like that and you really get into the nitty gritty of them and you spend a year of your life working with the product, or in some cases 2 years, you really get to know the product and you see all the warts and everything. And I have such respect for both of those adventures that
Oh
it's
yeah, and Dark Tower made number 12, so that's nothing to sneeze at
yeah.
for
Oh
sure.
no,
For a
not at all.
non-TSR product, for a Judges Guild product to sneak into number 12 is, I think, is pretty darn good.
Yeah,
So
definitely. So, all right. So I think we're going to wrap the show up with one more section here where we're going to talk about our top 5 surprises. And in the classic tradition of Rick and I going back and forth
go back and forth.
from our
Oh,
old
I'm so glad.
days of talking
We have to go
TSR,
back and forth.
we're going to go back
Yeah.
and forth and we're just going to talk about what our surprises are about the list overall. So, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go
I
first?
will go first. We'll get the easy one out of the way.
All right.
How in the hell Q1 showed up at number 14 is still something that is going to be mystify me. And I'm going to take it a step further. I also would like to know how C2 ended up at number 29 because C2, I'm guessing people didn't actually read that adventure and they just put it on there because they like remember the cover or the red. Maybe it was the red. I don't know. Red's supposed to be bad. I mean, but anyway, so one of my first surprise was the fact that Q1 was as high as it was on number 4 as 14, and C2 is also as high as it was on 29 because I was surprised that C2 made to be I'll throw this out there. I think L1 is better than C2. I'll put it out there and say that.
Yeah,
L1
I
Secret of
don't I
Boba.
don't disagree with
Yeah.
that. I think I don't know. I sort of lump C2, which is Inverness, right,
Yeah. Mhm.
with White Plume Mountain. I think they're both just early sort of funhouse slash tournament dungeons that people just got exposed to very early. Certainly, it was one of the earlier adventures I got exposed to, and I think that counts for a lot when people rank these things. That's my best. That's my best guess. So my first one, the fact that D3 was only 33 really surprised me. I mean, the Descent modules ranking as low as they did, again, D1 doesn't quite surprise me. But you and I both have a lot of love for D2, and
Yeah,
that barely squeaked in the top 50. And the fact that, I don't know, when you talk to people at conventions and you say, like, name some really classic adventures, I feel like even more than I give it credit for, I feel like, because I've mentioned it towards many times, I feel like Vault of the Draw always gets mentioned by
it
somebody.
does. Yeah, yeah,
Yet the fact that it only made 33, I thought it was going to be like 15 or something on our list, or
yeah,
18. I did not think it would be below. I didn't think it would be outside the top 20. So again, that doesn't mean I feel it should be in the top 20. I don't think it was in my top 20, but I didn't think it would be where it was. So that was my
yeah.
surprise there. Is just the whole Descent group of modules really fell low.
Gotcha. Okay. So one that I thought fell really low, we've already talked about is G2 at number
Oh yeah.
47. And we talked about
Yeah.
it. It was probably cannibalized by G1 through 3 and DDQ and everything, but that did surprise me that that one came in at 47 and
Oh
I
yeah.
just yeah, so I figured that
Yeah.
that was, that was a little bit surprising me. Not as big a surprise as the other one, but that surprised the heck out of me. So,
Yeah. No, I voted that up myself. I don't know where I put it, but I definitely put it above 47.
yeah,
You know,
I'm sure.
um, and it's just a solid adventure, a classic adventure with a great sense of place and atmosphere. So I'm really kind of surprised. My next one, here's our crossover. Might be our last crossover. Ding,
Ever.
is Q1 being
Yep.
14. Um, Again, utterly shocked. I probably should have put that as my number one, but yeah, Q1 making 14. I don't know what happened. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone when I saw that. So I'll ascribe that to people maybe mistakenly thinking G1 through Q1 and just writing
Yeah.
Q1 to have an accident or something. I don't know.
I did.
So
There was a few times when I looked at some votes and I was like, I had to make some, executive decisions on like, did they really mean this or did they mean
yeah.
this? No, there was a
Well,
lot
I
of,
don't know. That's
if I
yeah.
recall the one on there, like a DL1, a lot of people put down DL1, the Dragonlance Saga. And I was kind of like, well, are they saying all of the DLs? Or are they saying DL?
Yeah.
There was a couple things where I had to be like, think this is what they meant. So anyway.
Yeah.
Which
So
is a good
yeah, no,
segue to
no
my
insult
next
to
surprise
Dave
one.
Sutherland, but
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there.
So it was a perfect segue. So my next surprise thing was the fact that we had 209 different adventures voted on. And like I said, some really obscure things from Dungeon Magazine, Dragon Magazine, Polyhedron. Somebody voted for the sample adventure in the I think it was in the Holmes Basic book. There was a little sample adventure, got a vote. The dungeon from the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Dungeon of the Fire Opal, which was actually then redone in I think third edition as a full-blown dungeon magazine adventure. I think Chris Perkins might have even done it. I'm not sure. Um, that even got a vote. The Fighting Fantasy's getting a vote.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just the fact that and this is a great time to thank all of the 31 panelists that we had. I
Oh yeah,
hounded
yeah.
everybody to get their lists in and everything. Thank you guys. I mean, we wouldn't have this list if you guys didn't put their list together and take the time
Yeah.
to because I know I agonized over my list. I spent some
Oh yeah.
significant time pulling books out and looking things and ranking them and everything. So but anyway, yeah. So really good. So that's my next one.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
209
no,
different votes.
that wholeheartedly agree. That blew me away. And like we mentioned before, the sources that they came, the fact that there were two James Bond adventures in there, I think,
Yeah.
Dr. No and something else made it. And again, no slight to the James Bond system. If you want to see a good chase mechanic system, go to James Bond, but I'm still surprised it made it. All right. My third one I've got mentioned as a surprise was the Enemy Within campaign.
Okay.
Warhammer, again, Warhammer fantasy role playing game. never thought that would hit 28 or 31. And I didn't have a great familiarity with it. And as I mentioned, I had to run out and buy it because I read Shadows over Bugenhafen and I got it. When I read that, I said, wow, this is really good. And then when I started looking at the individual authors who contributed to that, and I started recognizing some of these great, some of the great talent that worked on the enemy within. Again, I also understand, not to say the whole campaign is even, it had up and downs, but just some wonderful elements there.
Yeah.
But yeah, surprised to see that, that got up as high as it did. 33 is pretty good for a Warhammer,
Yeah, yeah,
supplement.
no, it's on my bucket list of things. I agree with you 100%. Real quick, couple of questions. Yes, the Tower of Xenopus was the adventure in the Holmes box set. Our own producer asked what were the Star Wars adventures that were voted on. They were Starfall was the first one, which I'm not familiar
Okay.
with. I do not recall that one, but I do recall and I played this adventure, and I do think it was one. If I had to vote for a Star Wars one, I would have put this one on. Well, I gotta remember the name. Strike Force Shantypole. Strike Force
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Shantypole.
yeah.
I believe that Mike Stackpole wrote that. I think off the
Hmm.
top of my head, I could be wrong. But anyway, that was the one that I would have put on it. That was the two Star Wars West End Games adventures that made the list. And then the other question is honorable mention should go to Clayorama, Jeff Whitty. If you are ever in Pennsylvania, I would like to game with you because I played a lot of Clayorama back in my RPGA days. That would have been if we did a top RPGs. That would have made the list. I've played Clayorama. It is a lot of fun, but it's not an adventure unless there's a specific Clayorama adventure that I'm not aware of. But I do remember it was published in Dragon Magazine, and we had photocopies of those rules, and we used to play it at like all of the game conventions in the Northeast back in the 80s. So love it. Yes, have to admit, trying to get that. And yes, I am also in that. Yep, Play-Doh, Clay, yep, hilarious. Yeah, I'm sure you can Google the rules. Totally. I'm sure you.
Yeah,
Zeb Cook wrote those rules. I did not know that. Wow. Okay. Dragon number 125. Okay. I gotta write that down. Dragon 125. I miss it. You know what? Clay Rama is a good. It go get me
I
some Play-Doh
remember that
too.
too. I mean,
Yeah.
that was back in the era where you could open up Dragon and there'd
Yeah.
be either a little game in there,
Yep. There'd be a
like
mini game in
usually
there or
something,
something. Yep.
usually Tom Whamart was in
Yeah,
it.
he was usually the one that did it. Yeah.
You know, and you were
So,
like, oh, awful. That was like my first experience to Awful Green Things was in Dragon
yep.
magazine.
So,
So great
oh my
stuff.
God.
Great stuff.
All right, so
Takes me back.
my next surprising thing, like I've got two more on my list is uh the James Bond role-playing game showing up twice. I own it. I
Yep.
am going to bust it out and reread those rules because I am just absolutely I was shocked that two of them made it. I believe it was Dr.
Mhm.
No, and then the other one was what was the other James Bond role-playing one that made the list? Goldfinger and Dr. No. So that kind of makes sense if you think about it.
Interesting. And it's
But
funny.
yeah,
I have James Bond and I have a couple adventures, and I don't have either one of those two
yeah.
adventures.
I don't think I have
I
either
have
of
Live and
those
Let
either.
Die, and I have Man with a Golden Gun.
Yeah,
Those are the two I have.
I have one that's a different one. It's not like from one of the movies, and then I have the base set, the rule book, the
Mhm.
box rule book and everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
I actually think I've played some. I have a buddy who actually runs a modern spycraft like game, and
Mhm.
I think I would if you did the old James Bond rules, I might actually play. So
Oh wow.
maybe, yeah, maybe. I said maybe. I didn't say I definitely would. Anyway, so yeah, your next surprise, sir.
All right. My next surprise, not that I didn't help it, was that Tomb of Horrors made number four. Um, I know, there's so much of a love-hate relationship with Tomb of Horrors that even though it is a very classic old adventure written by Gygax, and was probably a lot of people's first exposure to sort of, trap-filled tomb type adventure, I didn't think it would be that high. I thought kind of the hate factor would push it down. And when I saw it was a number four, I was like flabbergasted. So yeah, because it was one of those I figured, oh, I'll make number 15 and make number 20. I did not think it would break the top five. So
All
that
right.
was my fourth surprise.
All right. And my last surprise is that Call of Cthulhu was so well represented in our list. And like I said, we you already talked about it.
Hmm.
Number 20 for Masks, number 23 for Horror on the Orient Express, and then The Haunting making it as well. I own The Haunting now. I've owned Horror of the Orient Express. My vote was definitely one in there. I did not
Hmm.
own Masks, and I did not vote for it. But like I mentioned earlier, when I was at PAX a couple of weeks ago, PAX Unplugged, I actually
Hmm.
picked it up. So I
Nice.
cannot wait to dig into reading that massive slipcase edition because I'm just very, very excited about
And that's the
excited.
good new version. That's the version
Yeah.
they've got new stuff in there. That
Yeah,
that's got
yeah, they
expanded
actually
stuff.
upgraded it and there's additional
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that. So yeah, so that was my last surprise. And my surprises were in no particular order, except for the fact that I still cannot believe
Same
that
here.
number one was number 14. Um
So Alana's gonna laugh, but because I tried, Chris sent his lists with his show notes, but I purposely tried not to read what you like. I just scanned it and went past it because I wanted mine to go in fresh, like we usually surprise each other. So bizarrely enough, we have a second crossover, and
oh
my
wow.
last item that I wrote down, I'm not kidding. What a fit way to end our last show, right?
Yeah.
Is I put that I was surprised that Call of Cthulhu was as well represented as it was,
Okay.
and I put a note in there about Maslin and Onathatep and Orient Express, like the fact that they broke 20 and 23. I thought was incredible. Now again, I've always had a I love Call of Cthulhu. I love even Delta Green. This past Halloween, I actually ran for the first time in years a Call of Cthulhu one shot for my regular D&D players who were very happily super open-minded and just went into it with a lot of enthusiasm, and we had a hell of a good time. So yeah, again, it was one of those things that if I somehow had time outside of my D&D campaign to run something else, I'd be running Call of Cthulhu. So just excited and thrilled to see Call of Cthulhu as well represented as it
I
was.
love that. Jeff Whitty again. I'm Call of Cthulhu curious. I've never played, but I would try it. And I agree. I've not played it in a very long time. I played it back in the 80s, and it was typically played in the Northeast. Obviously, since Call of Cthulhu is, bound, kind of based in the Northeast, it's very prominent in the Northeast. And
Yeah.
so at all the conventions in the Northeast that I used to attend, there was almost always there was a Saturday midnight slot from midnight till dawn. You could go play Call of Cthulhu, and I played two events that way way back in the day when
Mhm.
I could stay up all night and not be wrecked
Yeah.
for the rest of the day, the following day. And it's just great times. I mean, there's something about playing it in a quiet banquet room and there's nothing else around and it's just so quiet in a hotel where it's normally
Yeah.
bustling at a convention and
Yeah.
everything. And it was great because playing Call of Cthulhu in a noisy convention room at 11 a.m. on a Saturday, it's not the
No.
same. It's not the
No.
same. So
No. No. But if you have the right group and the right atmosphere, and
yeah,
certainly a change of pace from D&D.
totally.
But yeah, I enjoy the change of pace of it. And as Chris knows, I like horror movies and things like
Oh
that.
yeah.
And I'm a big Lovecraft reader anyway. So for me, it's like a natural fit. But yeah, just Jeff, try it. You'll like it, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure of it. So and that's it, folks. Rick, what do you gotta for the last time tell everybody?
Oh my goodness. Am I saying this for the last time, or at least the last time with the two
Forever.
of us
Yeah.
here? Folks, if you liked what you watched, and I hope you did, because we had so much fun and that you could join us and hear us chat about these little adventures we all love. Give us a follow, give us a like. If you're not subscribing to Goodman Games official channel already, and why not? Ring that bell, subscribe. That way we can give you a heads up when new videos hit the pike. And before I forget and we sign off, I want to thank you, Chris, for literally
Yep.
for 4 years of being an awesome co-host on both Talking TSR and this
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
Super, super fun. Believe me, I would not be doing this, folks, for 4 years with somebody if I didn't like this guy. And
Yeah.
and it's been so
Not a
much
paid
fun. I'm gonna
position,
miss it.
folks. Not a paid
Yeah,
position. So
yeah.
doing it just for love.
We
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 do
do
this.
this for
There's a
the fun
reason
of it.
why this show's on a Sunday night, and we do our prep
Yeah,
work like during the
yeah.
weekend and stuff like that. So this is
We
this
do
is because
this
we
out of a
love to
love
do it.
for it, right?
So
But no, it's been so much fun doing this show with you, and thank you, Alana, for being our steady hand. Behind the scenes, I don't know what we would do without you.
yes. Well, we wouldn't do the
And
show,
thank you,
that's for sure.
viewers, for yeah, and just thank everybody watching for 4 years of good times.
Yeah. No, it
Um,
was a blast. And if you guys, we might be back at some point. You're going to see us in a couple odd things. Like obviously
yeah,
there's going to be videos dropping about products and stuff like that. But this
yeah,
is
you'll
our
see our
last like
faces again
official
for sure. But
regularly scheduled show. Who knows? Maybe
yeah,
we'll show back up again and do another show at some point. I don't know. Maybe if you guys do I wouldn't say a letter campaign, but if you guys bomb the chat when these videos are
yeah,
posted that you want us to do more shows, if you get 10,000 signatures, maybe it'll happen. But
yeah. Give us an
so
idea.
yes. Yeah. If not, otherwise it's been great. Rick, thank you for all your time, the personal time doing all this and everything. It's been awesome. And yes, Elena, on the other side of the glass, we would not be doing this without you. This show would not exist. You guys never see her or hear her, but she's the one that keeps us running. She keeps
Yeah,
everything plugged in. And even if the sound isn't that good, but anyway.
yeah. We can
With that,
focus on this geeky stuff because she's right doing the
yeah,
background stuff. So
exactly. So with that, everybody have a great rest of your night. I'm gonna go watch the end of the football game and
yeah,
then maybe curl up with masks of Nyla or whatever. I can't pronounce it, but anyway, and start jumping into that. So everybody, you have a great rest of your evening, a great rest of your year. Everybody have a happy
yeah.
new year
Happy
and
New Year, folks.
good luck. Take care.
Good night.